But we'll just start off by talking a little bit about Fireside at 5. We started off as a platform for people within the same industry to really connect with one another and discuss what's been going on since COVID had started. Back in March, we got started with Fireside at 5, and it's kind of evolved into this really amazing platform for companies and organizations to have a sponsored series where they can kind of dive into pressing topics within their industry and invite industry leaders, whether it be within their own industry or in outside industries that somehow connect, to really collaborate and discuss how their certain positions have changed, or their careers have changed, or the industry as a whole has changed. So Brenna really dove into more of a workshop-based series where the beginning was focused on how to tell your Instagram story, or how to really maximize your resources on Instagram. And this one will be more about the commercial style documentary storytelling. So we're super excited to have Ms. Brenna here and her co-facilitator, Chris, and together they will kind of dive into the workshop. But first and foremost, we want to make sure that we have everybody else introduced so everybody can get familiarized with one another. So I'm Gabby Margus. I'm the Director of Sponsorship and Outreach for Fireside at 5. And I'm super, super excited to hear more about this particular chat and hear what everybody else has to say as well. And Stephanie, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie. I'm currently the social media manager at Sage Hospitality Group. So I oversee the strategy and execution best practices for our portfolio of hotels, along with any additional outlets we have, such as clubs, fitness centers, and a handful of restaurants that are not part of the restaurant group. And this commercial style documentary storytelling is not something that I'm super familiar with or that we've tapped into. So kind of looking to learn the ins and outs and hear some best practices on that.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us again, Stephanie. And Ian, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a DP up in Boulder, Colorado. I don't know, work with various brands in the outdoor industry. I've done a fair amount of editorial work through various publications, and I don't know, just more or less here to learn and just dive deeper into the community.
Love it. Thanks so much. And Edna, if you'd like to go ahead.
Hi, I'm Edna Hernandez. I'm currently working with Cardofront, working with their customer success and also translating from English into Spanish. Cardofront is getting ready to start out in a new market, and with that comes social media presence as well. So this storytelling style of documentary was really interesting because we're trying to find our voice for Cardofront in our particular industry.
Awesome. And I know that Jason is here on the list. We're super excited to have you as well.
I'm Jason Harris. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I work with Edna. We're going into kind of a new territory where we're educating realtors about flood risk and flood insurance. We'll be entering our first market this summer, and actually what Edna said, it's around kind of finding our voice, simplifying the message, which has been very confusing for all parties involved, and really allowing kind of both the education piece as well as the technology simplify people's understanding of what has been kind of a binary discussion. It's you're either on a floodplain or not, and it's not significant anymore. It's got to be a question about risk, and so we're trying to help define a new way of having that conversation. I can't hear you, Gabby.
Sorry.
You're muted. Okay.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Sean.
Hi, hello. Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. I apologize in advance. I might be touch and go here. I'm taking this from the car, but I assume we're doing little introductions of ourselves. So my name is Sean O'Neill. I'm a director photographer local to Denver. Definitely, an emphasis on storytelling from the commercial point of view is something I'm both very interested in and very much apply to my work on a daily basis. So, excited to be in a room with like-minded people.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And before we get Brenna and Christopher to intro themselves, if we could have everybody mute themselves while Brenna and Chris go in on their workshop presentation, and then that would just be easier to hear everybody. Thank you. Go ahead, guys.
Cool. Well, I'll start. I'm Chris. I live in Los Angeles. I'm a director and producer, cinematographer, and I've a production company called Territory 6, and we mainly work in the lifestyle sports space / automotive space. And so I've been doing this for as long as I can remember. Brenna?
Awesome. I am Brenna, and I think most of you guys have met me. So for everyone else who might be watching, I am the owner and founder of Great Escape Media, a company that focuses on production and content strategy. And I've actually asked Chris to help co-facilitate this chat with me because he is a partner that I work with a ton and a friend of mine in this specific realm of commercials and documentary storytelling. So he's a great person that I'm excited to have here with us to kind of talk through some of these things, and is also very marketing minded as well. So kind of what we are gonna chat through today, we're going to start off with showing an example of actually a piece that we worked on together kind of within this realm about a year ago for a company called Climber. It is a fitness machine that is similar to the Peloton, but for Versa climbing. So we're going to start off with showing that, and then kind of dive into why this type of commercials work, and kind of how to get into it, and what you can do to kind of get behind the marketing of these type of pieces. So I'm going to share my screen and show you guys this documentary style commercial that we worked on together.
I would just add, I think a better way to maybe to add to that is like a documentary hybrid. And that's kind of what we want to be talking about today, is the hybrid of really planned out specific storytelling combined with real life stories with real individuals.
Awesome. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. Oops.
This all started with a simple idea, an idea that the human body was made to move. So our focus was to create a machine that could move with it. We knew it would be easy to just create something different than what was already out there. But to create something truly better takes an unparalleled amount of care, focus, and artistry. The design seamlessly pairs the technology of the user interface with the actual movement of the human body.
All right, guys, let's just start climbing. Make sure you block out your elbows and knees, add a little bend. Now we're going to go ahead into a sprint. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
This all began with a simple idea that the human body was made to move.
Cool. Thanks for showing that, Brenna. I'll just kind of jump in, and I kind of want to talk you guys through, like, coming from a client perspective and walking through like the limitations of budget and how do we come up with that concept, and basically like what is the most effective way that we can tell a story with a limited budget. And I think that with so many clients and agencies nowadays, there's so many platforms that a film has to live on. And I think one thing that Brennan and I are really passionate about is not giving somebody, as I like to say, a brick, where we spend $70,000 on a commercial and it goes and sits on a YouTube page that it has 300 plays. That's not really effective for a client. So especially with this, we knew that they had a limited budget. So everything is about keeping things to scale. So I think the number one thing that with documentary filmmaking, especially in commercial production, is putting yourself, giving yourself a sandbox and saying, how can we tell an effective story about a machine that we have one day to shoot? We have one talent and we have the designer of the machine. So let's tell the story from the perspective of the designer. And then let's cast one person to bring in the film for more of a lifestyle aspect. And so once you can create that sandbox, we were able to tell that story of this is a machine that's designed to move you. And that once we can focus in on the theme using real people, one person for the lifestyle, then utilizing the designer's story, we were able to put that together for a pretty low cost, a one-day shoot. And a lot of people are kind of shocked at like, oh, look at this production quality for such low cost. But it was all because we sat inside the sandbox and said, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this.
Hey, Chris, can I just jump in and
Jump
ask?
right in.
So,
Yeah.
cost-wise,
Yeah.
it's well produced. It's what, about 90 seconds in total? How long is it?
Yeah, it's right around 90 seconds.
Okay, so it's beautifully done, and there's the reveal of the equipment. You see the woman working on it. You hear the designer. How much did that cost them start to end?
So there was a little bit of strategy involved with how we were working with the client. They were at the time they were still in startup mode. They had some basic funding to get things off the ground.
Right.
So, but I knew that if we were able to help them really create a good brand and image, that we could help them get first round. And so this first film we did for 20,000, and then we were able to help them raise about $5 million for
Really?
first round.
Wow.
And it wasn't just all the film; their business plan was really well set.
Sure.
But it helped give them a really nice package to go into investors and to present and say, hey, this is. They went into rooms and they were able to show the film and show the machine right there.
Right.
And it was just a really well-rounded package for them.
Yeah, it's confidence building. They look professional. They're hitting above their weight, as they say. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we were able to do help them kind of launch the first round of content for them. So we recently just finished a bigger production for them. It was not quite documentary aspects, but we're not showing it. It's on the link there in the notes that we can share later. And then we were also able to shoot photography for them as well. So we gave them a really nice package deal to help launch their whole brand. So.
Yeah, and to add on to that too, what you said, Chris, is they're actually using the footage from that film that we created. That's this more documentary for the investor side of things. So that film was basically created for an investor deck and what they were showing at these trade shows and stuff to get first round of funding. And that's content is now being used on their social media platforms and repurposed in a way because it's still very relevant for their consumer, repurposed in a way that they're able to use that in a way that makes a lot of sense for them. So it's stuff that has longevity to it too, because of the content that Chris and I created. Like everyone's always going to want to kind of tell this story about how these types of products get started. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm super into helping brands with is telling this kind of story of more behind the scenes of what they're doing so that a customer or someone like an investor can connect with that story on a deeper level than just showing like these beauty shots of a product. So it's kind of a merger between the two.
So two things. One is help me understand, and maybe for others, what the difference, the definition of documentary style. I mean, I get it visually, right?
So I think
but versus other types of like common kind of video presentations that we're seeing right now, right? You're seeing kind of a renaissance of different styles and whatever. So what's documentary versus others?
I think that that's a really good question, especially it's like helpful to define like what we're talking about. I took the designer's story. It was a real life story. And I said, let's just talk about him designing the machine. And it wasn't writing a voiceover. There wasn't, let me cast this extra character. It was, let me use him in his real life and then just tell his story on camera. And that we're capturing that. And so we would call that a documentary. Okay. And I'm not trying to manipulate a story, write a script, have him deliver a line a certain way.
And again, from popular now, whether it's, people are tweeting out or image, Instagram or whatever. It seems like documentary style is kind of the way to communicate these days. It's very kind of in the first person. Here's what I'm doing. Here's the context. Here's what I'm trying to deliver to you, whatever the message is, right?
Yeah, and I think the reason why is this is one of the things we can talk about is that it brings a sense of authenticity.
You took the word out of my mouth. Yeah, awesome.
And that's one thing that film works so well, is because I didn't feel like I feel like if you were to look at that, you could have shot that whole commercial and branded that whole machine with like a really addy way. You could be like, buy the new successful machine, do X, Y, or Z, but it doesn't sound authentic. It's not actually getting at the heart and soul of like the humanity behind why you did something. As I say, people care they don't care what you do, they care why you do it, right? And we just tried to do that exact thing for that brand. So this is why we do it. We made a machine, not just for the machine's sake, because we wanted to move you. We wanted to move you in a better way.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get after the heart and soul behind how people feel,
right?
Versus just the products and features. Because you can make a film about products and features, and that's fine. We need those, and there's a time and place for them. But it doesn't move an audience like trying to go after the heart. So. And I think going after what you're saying, even like what you're seeing on social media, I think there's a rise of also, there's a rise of influencers, obviously on social media, and there's a rise of that kind of micro fame. And it's also a really great way for a smaller brand to reach out to cast somebody inside of the commercial that has a bigger reach beyond them. So you could say, hey, I'm going to put a social media star in here that can tweet out this video, and we'll just tell their story as I'm a photographer and I have 1 million followers. So let's, use him in the commercial. Brenna, that's something you could talk to a little bit more too.
Yeah, I mean, so with what I do is like obviously merging the two of these industries together. So working with people like Chris to help craft and tell these stories, and then to make sure that they live in the right place and get shared, like he said, versus just 300 YouTube videos. So it's working with people. So like, for instance, Ian works in the realm of a lot of professional outdoor athletes. So it's like finding a story within there of this pro skier that has 500,000 followers, that if you make a film on him for someone like a North Face, that you get the added benefit of his followers and him sharing that video in addition to a platform like North Face. So that's a really great way to integrate people like influencers or professional athletes into this type of storytelling, because your reach goes so much further. And I think in old times sake, a lot of the people were spending money to put commercials out on broadcast TV and stuff like that. Whereas right now there's such a smaller dollar of entry level than there used to be with things like social media and influencers and then paid ads, that you can get this type of content out way more far and wide than you used to be able to. So I think hopefully that answered your question, and pinged onto what Chris was saying. But there's with this documentary specific stuff, there's such a huge opportunity to partner with both a brand and a persona to have a reach for this kind of thing goes so much further than you can with just crafting a story and casting like a random person for these type of things, and making it more fabricated versus having, like I said, it crafted. So, and then another example, Chris, that I just pulled up as we were talking about this is the Life Proof spot that you worked on.
Let's throw that up. That's an example of real.
This might be a little bit sensitive because it is in the CrossFit realm, which there's a lot of stuff going on right now, but just focus on the story.
It's not used the name CrossFit anymore.
Yeah, it's a fitness commercial. So let me share this really quick, because this is actually a super, super good example of what we're kind of talking about, of partnering with someone like a professional athlete or influencer to get the reach and story kind of more far and wide. So let me share my screen again.
It's just your sister. I'm sorry about not calling you earlier. Mom told me about you getting to the games next summer. That's so cool. I'm so pumped for you. Anyway, I was just thinking about you. I just wanted to let you know. We just take a trip together soon or something. I kind of need a little break from life right now. Maybe we go skiing or something. I don't know. Okay, well, anyway, call me back. I should be free the rest of the night. you.
It's kind of choppy, but I hope you guys got the story on that one. So again, we casted I worked with an agency out of Chicago on that one, but we casted real person, and they asked me to write for it. And I said, why are we going to write a voiceover? Let's just use a real story from this person's life, and then let that be her motivation for why she works out. And that was just a real story that she was like, I had this voicemail from my sister that I still have. And I was like, let's just throw that in there and let's make that be the heart and soul of the story. And then have, the way you can cut it and direct it is how we're directing, to make people feel. So, and actually like evoking emotions, I say.
And that particular athlete has a ton of following on.
Yeah, and when we released it, it was like she just posted on her Instagram, and then like all the channels went out. It was CrossFit posted as well. It had like millions of plays in like 3 days as a result of that. So, but again, I like to, as a filmmaker and a director, I like to tell the most authentic stories. How can I get after that most human spirit, human emotion? But how can I wrap it inside of a really crafted, directed, highly visual story? And one thing that I'm really drawn to is is just purely visual storytelling. And that's one thing, as you'll see in my work, is it's not just B-roll shots shot here and there. I like to try to get that human heart, give me that soul, and we add these really beautiful visuals on top of it to help tell the story. Because if you notice, it's a really interesting, I like to challenge myself in every project where you look at a sports video, we've all seen it, right? The guy's like working out, there's like encouraging in the background. But I'm like, how can we flip that? How can we give it a heart? How can we give it a soul? Well, you're not going to do that by some heavy-handed voiceover. You're going to do that by actually trying to tell that most authentic story from that person's life that then relates to the brand, really, at the end of the day. I can just evoke an emotion, and then the brand equals that, right? And that's what the coolest thing about emotional storytelling and documentary storytelling is, that then people associate the brand with that. And I think, do you want to pull up the extra gum one, Brenna, as an example of that? And I think also to talk to that more is also like, there's not many products in that video, and it was for Life Proof, but it was a couple product placements. But if you're telling a really good story, you put a logo at the end.
Your favorite family tradition.
I'm gonna wait till the commercial ends. Ian, did you have a question in between while I look this up?
Yeah, quick question. So, I mean, obviously that's like a very powerful, voicemail that you were able to use kind of as the stand-in voiceover for that piece. How long did it take you to find the talent? I feel like, what you were looking for was like very specific, which is great because you know what you're looking for, but how did you cast a net like that to be able to get in contact with that individual?
So you're talking about the actual athlete?
Correct.
Oh yeah, so she was sponsored by the brand that we were working with. And then I just came in and wrote for the brand, if that makes sense. So I came in and they had the agency kind of had some like rough ideas what they wanted. And then I said, why don't we take this one? And then why don't we run it? Then my treatment was all about running with this kind of voicemail idea as the background and the heart and soul behind the piece.
Oh, and then one of the athletes was like, I have a voicemail.
No,
and then
so
it just went from
basically
there.
what we did is she like told us about it, and then I just wrote it. I wrote the voiceover to help create the narrative, but I was just using her real life experiences. I was just taking that real story from her and then just making a little bit of cinema to it. So.
Okay, cool. Great.
Yeah. And what is, so you said it goes on social media. She bumps it, she tweets about whatever, 100,000, whatever amount of plays. So how does that translate then on the back end to moving that product? What kind of metrics do you have based on that brand view and then selling Life, whatever it was called, Life Force or something?
So Brenna, you can talk a little bit more to that. My world is kind of on the front end as much.
Yeah, you're doing the creative.
Working
Brenna's got the business side. Yeah.
So I could just talk BS, but I'm not going to. Brenna, you can talk to this.
Yeah. So one of the really cool things about doing something like what he did for the Life Proof commercial is this is super relevant for the current times right now too, is that you're basically giving the brand to this quote unquote spokesperson so that it's not coming exactly from the mouth of the brand itself. And this helps a lot because a lot of the time, if you're like breathing your own exhaust and putting that exhaust out to the world, people can get really tired of that.
Right.
And these types of things where somebody else is telling this brand story or connecting with the brand actually transacts a lot better kind of across the board, especially with social media, because of the fact that it isn't this brand that's like, oh, we're really good because of this. It's like someone else saying, hey, I have a connection with this brand. And this is why you should be a part of it. This is kind of, it's very relevant for the times right now too. So it's a lot of people are using this type of commercial storytelling right now because it's the only thing that they can film during these COVID times. But it's actually very connecting. So for instance, I think we put the Nike example in the sheet too, where Nike basically took a bunch of images of people working out at home to show that you're not alone. Like it's these people can connect with a real person versus like a brand spokesperson. That was rambly, but
I think I can fill that in a little bit, Brenna, to help you out there. I think there's multiple different kinds of films and brand strategies behind films. And I think the ones that we're talking about specifically are less trying to sell that exact product right now, but it's trying to bring brand awareness and within a look and feel to the brand and a tone to the brand as well, and say like, this is the kind of people that we support. These are the kinds of athletes that we support. These are the kinds of stories that we want to tell. And sometimes, like I think Yeti is a really prime example of that. They've done a really good job of not really marketing a product. They've marketed a lifestyle and they've marketed stories, and people connect with story. So what they've done, they've built out a bank of hundreds of films that are about a specific audience, which is fishermen and people that use a cooler, but they don't really show the cooler. But as a result of that, their cooler sales have gone through the roof because they've identified themselves with an audience. And people don't want to be sold. Granted, we see ads that are like product, and that's great. And we click on them and we'll maybe buy that product, right? But that's, I think, at least today that we're talking about is like, especially in a documentary film format, is less about how can I sell, because that's, I think, a different strategy, and that's a little bit more nuanced inside of like, in 3 seconds, the product needs to be up front or whatever that may be.
Yeah, and to add on top of that too, I was actually part of a chat a couple of weeks ago about marketing in the outdoor industry specifically. And what all of these industry leaders in the outdoor industry are saying right now is if you don't have a cause or a story associated with the brand that you're working with, you're going to get lost, especially in times like this. So if you don't have a voice right now and you're not telling a story specifically about your brand versus just like sell, hey, this product is amazing because this, you're going to get lost during a time like this with these brands that are actually spending the time to tell these stories. So an example that I've been showing people this week is that one of the good examples that I love a lot is that REI puts a lot of this content similar to Yeti as well, where they're just telling a story about something that has to do with outdoor to show that they are a part of social change, ethical change, environmental change through these kind of storytelling based videos that don't necessarily act as like a commercial, but as a brand builder. And this is amazing content for things like Instagram stories, social media advertisements, stuff like that. And even if this stuff were to move over and get featured in a film festival, the brand REI is kind of plastered all over it to say, hey, we were a part of this story. That's why you should be a fan of our brand. So one of the examples that I have specifically is this film called Safe Haven. That's actually really relevant right now. It's about these two guys that opened a climbing gym in inner city Memphis. And REI sponsored that specific thing to be able to put on their platform, similar to kind of what Yeti does, to show that they are taking part in this brand building aspect of social justice and telling the stories of that might not necessarily have been told without them.
And then I think I just want to, is that extra gum thing too long, Brenna?
Oh, I can play it.
I just think it might be an interesting example of really a massive brand just telling, and this is totally outside of the documentary format, but I think it's a good example of almost no product at all through this whole spot. And I think it was released 3 years ago and it blew up the internet. it became like it won like every single advertising award. It became like the #1 spot of the year as a result of not putting the product in their commercial, basically. Turn it up a little bit, Brenna.
Only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Oh, shall I stay? Would it be a sin? Oh, if I can help falling in love with you. Oh, like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be. Won't take my hand, take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in love with you. Oh, for I can't help falling in love.
Give extra, get extra.
And I digress. There was a little more product in there, but it was so artfully done, right? It was so tactfully, just like, oh, here's a piece of gum. You're not really thinking it's a product placement. It's just such a great spot. And again, just the example of like going after the heart and soul, you remember that, right? You carry that with you because it made you feel something. And that, I mean, every time you think of gum now, you're going to think of this little cute little spot about two people falling in love.
I cry every time.
So
yeah,
great.
it was totally beautiful. What's an and it's a tough question, but what's an optimal length in this environment, right? I mean, you know, that one was 2 minutes. The first one you showed was 90 seconds. I mean, what's the span in your opinion, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I like to, I think shorter the better, the more effectively as you can tell a story, but especially when it comes to something that really trying to evoke an emotion. I feel like with a 30-second commercial, it's really easy to do comedy. But if you have 60 to 90 seconds, you can actually have the opportunity to try to evoke some sort of like heartfelt emotion and whatever you're going after. So, and again, inside of this documentary space, we're looking at more brand building than super specific product sell. And so I would say, I mean, Brendan, you can talk to that, but also I think there's opportunities to take that content. And it's like to say, it's like, we're shooting a bunch of real people. We can take that content and create a content bank as a result of it.
Yeah.
We can edit things down and we can make that 15-second Instagram ad, and then we can make that 30-second ad. But the most, like the emotional one is gonna probably be in that 60 to 90-second range. Brent, you go.
Yeah, so I think what I usually do in these scenarios is I'll work with people like Chris to come up with an overarching idea for these. And what will happen is we'll split that content bank into like a 5, a 10, a 30, and a 60-second piece. And those things can kind of live on multiple different platforms. And what we talked about last week on the Instagram story chat is also cutting something into a story-based format, because a lot of advertisements are actually popping up in that format now. I think one of the things that I mentioned last week too is when I said, hey, the Instagram story is going to be a really important thing for people to focus on. And when I took that to people like Chris and storytellers, they're like, I'm not shooting anything vertically. Like that is just making my work look like crap. Like I can't do that anymore, or I'm not going to do something like that. But I think a lot of that's kind of shifting over to where people are making cuts specifically for Instagram stories, or switching the camera to shoot something or one take vertically for it to live there. But a lot of people I think are selling packages, like people in the production world are selling packages where you're going to get those multiple different pieces because there's so many places that they need to live now. So people like Chris and I and a couple other people in the industry are creating those packages of the 5, the 10, the 15, the 30, and the 60 to be able to use across all platforms and use for more than just one time. Like it's not just this one piece that goes on TV once and then you never see it again. There's pieces of this content that gets split across the board, which is a lot more valuable to a brand.
And Brenna and Chris, if I can just interrupt, Stephanie had mentioned something in the chat, a question, tagging off of what Brenna was saying about making sure you have a story to tell and share. How do you see these documentary style videos translating in the hospitality space, hotel specific, that isn't scripted, like a couple walking through the hotel laughing at their drinks or constantly smiling, but actually telling a story and adding the emotion?
Chris, much creative
this is
brain.
like one of my favorite things to do in the world is the challenge of saying, like, we've all seen that video before, right, Stephanie? And I've shot those videos for agencies and clients before. They just want the like B-roll, you put the music and all that. I think the number one thing is like, especially in the documentary space, it's like it comes down to like casting. And it's like, how can you find the real people that have a story that we can piggyback off of, right? And I feel like once you can find the seed of a small story, is then the opportunity to then use that, like the format of like, let's try to make this as real as possible. You cast like real people inside of a different environment. There's a lot, and one thing that's tough is trying to convince client and agencies to spend more time on the front end versus the back end. And so much of this to make really good content is spent on pre-production and actually time, preparing and researching, digging for that actual story. And it's tough because it's not actual, like we're not spending money on film. We're not spending money on labor, we're spending money on research. But film is made in pre-production. And those 2 films that I showed as my examples, all those were there, even though they were documentary films, I had interviewed them before and I knew what I was trying to do, visually at least. I knew that I had a thread of an emotional story and I could go in and tell a visual, authentic story. So it was very well planned out. There's no on set, I'm not just reacting to things. So I would say it all happens in pre-production. I'd say it's trying to find the thread or that seed of a story that might be within a context that we've heard or a story that you've heard. And how can we turn that and make it into an authentic kind of docu-film?
Thank you.
Brenna,
that was awesome.
Yeah.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. I think it's like Chris said, finding that story of those people that maybe went on the best vacation of their life or something and stayed at so-and-so hotel, like, and finding those stories from the beginning and really crafting that from the beginning versus like doing reactionary. And I say this to all my clients is like reactionary marketing is never a good idea. The more planning and storytelling and like testing stuff between other people before you actually go through and do something is the most important way to do marketing, to create content, stuff like that. So
it just really kind of depends upon, I think the thing that what I like to push as a director and the way I see the world is much more of a hybrid approach to documentary filmmaking. Is I'm really going after what documentaries bring authenticity. And I really am drawn to authenticity. But then I'm also drawn to really polished, very specific visuals to help tell that story. And I think my unique skill set is taking that authentic story and then building it in with really polished visuals to help tell that story. So versus just like, because there's many different genres of documentary, right? You could shoot on your iPhone and capture moments, but I like to capture that authenticity then tied into the highly polished visuals.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, of course.
I see a question from you, Jason, in the chat. So Chris, I don't know if you remember.
Jason, give me a hard job over here.
It's free advice. You get what you pay for, right?
Exactly, right?
So Jason introduced himself. He's obviously working with this flood insurance company. So it's like next challenge, how do you sell flood insurance in an educational way, but not scaring the potential home buyer into the typical images of flood catastrophe and stuff like that? Like, how do you bring emotion into something that's typically a catastrophe?
It's my favorite challenge in the world. I like to say, it's the simplest thing. Is like, how can we go after the person and make them care about the thing that they want to protect? Right. So instead of selling the insurance, sell the emotion behind what you're protecting.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the simplest response to that. There's a lot of nuanced ways to do that, but don't show the flood. Show the item or whatever that may be that got passed down through family lineage or whatever, that person is irreplaceable, or whatever. You find the thing that people connect with on a human emotional level. We get insurance to protect ourselves. We don't care. We're hoping that the flood never happens. You don't want to advertise that. You want to advertise that, like, you want to protect the thing that is valuable to you. So, and obviously that's a longer conversation that we need.
Yeah, no, so I appreciate it. So back to the iPhone thing, right? And, you know, we're now in a place, especially because of COVID, that everybody's using their phones to, I mean, you know, the whole George Floyd thing, I don't want to get into politics, but a lot of the dialogue, especially amongst kind of African-American athletes and stuff, when everything went down, especially, you know, whether it was Drew Brees kind of going off and then his teammates coming, everything is now, you know, in somebody's home or somebody's backyard or whatever. So help me and others about, I mean, obviously you guys are shooting with the best equipment. When you do that kind of thing, even for 20,000, that is primo quality, right? Where's, I don't have $20,000. I probably could spend, and then I can probably invest, I don't know, 1,000 to do, you know, to do one story arc and do 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. And then we still have to do online videos for education because there's like a tutorial component to it, right? But can you shoot with an iPhone, or do we have to get to a regular camera?
I am the #1 proponent that cameras don't matter.
Okay.
Granted, do I love a fancy camera? Yeah, but guess what? I can go grab a little digital SLR camera that's $2,000 and put a lens on it and tell the story. So I think that iPhones, yeah, it challenges the status quo of the industry, especially in the film industry. But I've been telling all my friends that want to shoot in these $100,000 cameras all the time, I'm like, guys, your client doesn't care.
Yeah.
And so they care about like telling the story, and they care about an ROI. And so how can you actually serve your client, not yourself? And I think as artists, there's the push and the pull, right? As artists, you want to have all the tools, you want to have all the crew, you want to have all these things. But especially in the commercial space, I think that I like to say there's the 1% is getting smaller, the percentage where the brands like Nike are pushing out really expensive multi-million-dollar commercials. But there's only 10 brands in the United States that are doing that now, versus years ago, that was kind of the standard entry point. So it's all about the story. If you find a really good story, and you find really good lighting and a good backdrop, your iPhone is great. Like all my Instagram is like, just my photos on my Instagram is like 90% of it is my iPhone. And granted, I'm not like promoting the iPhone, but it's still a great tool.
I think to ping off that too, to bring back up COVID, there's a ton of stuff that is being filmed on iPhone right now, and people are putting their money into the post-production side, so the editing of that footage to make it really meaningful. So like a lot of the stuff that I'm working on right now is we're sending guides to people to self-film themselves with like kind of specific guidelines behind them. And then it's getting passed off to an editor, like someone like Ian or Sean, who I don't know where he went. It gets passed off to someone like that, or Chris, to edit it in a really artful way, where you're kind of piecing together the stuff that already exists. And that is like a lower price of entry a lot of the time.
So to that point, what editing suites do you prefer for kind of the lower end, like iPhone stuff? Or
so I think just one thing to acknowledge, especially within film, you get what you pay for. Art, it's an art form. And so I could literally edit something on my iPhone, right? But yeah. I've been literally editing for 15 years, and all the editors that I use have been editing for 15 years. And all they do is stare in front of their computer all day, right? It's like everybody has access to the technology, but not everybody has access to actually like bring the story and heart forward. So I think we can ask that question, but the way I like to work is like, that's content, just like click, 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 click. But you're not going to get a nuanced story with just like an editor that's $200 a day with like a really crappy editing system or whatever. It's not really about the system, if that makes sense, because we can tell a story on an iPhone. And the prime example is like that new Nike spot that came out. So literally just iPhone shots, but the concept, the music, and the editing. What's the quote? Is like, you're paying me like $10,000 to do something in 5 minutes, but I've spent 20 years and able to do that or something, right? You've kind of heard that theory before. And I think so much of filmmaking is that. It's the art form that people are constantly grinding, become better storytellers. And that's what you're paying for. You know, directors, my friends, are charged $20,000 to $30,000 a day to make a commercial. It's not the labor, it's the amount of years that it took in order to get there to charge $20,000 a day to shoot.
So to that point, why don't each of you give us 2 or 3 storytellers that you guys really look to that are really super hot that we can go and look at?
Yeah, we can do that.
Who do you like?
Well, I mean, so you got to. So are you talking like in editing or in film or like in directing world?
Well, just kind of in this kind of style. Who do you guys emulate when you look to do these documentary type of storytelling?
I have a bunch of people that I really emulate and look up to, and I can follow up with that on an email.
Sure.
To kind of share it with you because it's not off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's cool.
I can just fire off.
Yeah,
But then also like a part of my production company, and Brenna too, is I have a really big network of directors and filmmakers I work with. So, and I try to, everything that we do has the kind of same consistent tone and feel and story. So.
And Jason, I will send a follow-up email to everybody
Cool.
today and have Chris's contact information and as well as Brenna's so that you can follow up.
Jason, you asked all the good questions. I appreciate it. Thanks for jumping in.
And call me Mr. Prompt.
Great.
It's been super interesting, guys. It's
Cool.
really been,
I'm glad
it's good to get the context behind, because I see all this stuff. I see all these images all day. It's just, and I want to go back to something that Brenna said at the beginning. To me, especially that first story that you told from the designer's point of view, it works because it's the context of why you designed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm huge on the context, right? I mean, context is the framework in which everything else falls into, right? So from the get-go, you're framing exactly where you want to lead people with why, what's in it for me.
And also, if you notice about that film, it's, I think, one of the hardest things to do in filmmaking, especially in commercial filmmaking, is telling a singular story. And if you notice that the film was about a movement, and it was about a designer designing a machine to move. And it wasn't about a machine that moves and, you know, it does X, Y, or Z. It just moves you. And if you want to move differently, use Climber. And so that was a really tough message. And as a startup brand, as they were trying to kind of search for their message, I was able to kind of help them kind of distill that into the story. And it's hard though, because a client has to say yes to one thing, but it's better if it's about one thing versus 3 things. It's the hardest thing to do is try to convince somebody that you can't have 4 messages in this. It's got to be one thing. You want to actually be effective in this ad and effectively communicate an emotion. Rip away everything and focus on one thing. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, we do have 5 minutes left. So any closing questions, comments, Brenna and Chris, if you have any other presentation or video that you'd like to share, please do so now.
I think
I'm good on the videos and stuff. I hope this has been educational for everybody. This is just kind of Brenna and I's passion, and I just love filmmaking, and it's my life and blood. So like I live and breathe this every day. So this has been fun to talk about something I don't really always get to articulate. Brenna, jump in. Got anything?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you have anyone else has other questions, we're happy to answer and happy to answer over email.
Yeah, and I think we'll just follow up with our contact information specifically, and feel free to reach out to us. And you know, whatever this conversation about how to do something. Stephanie specifically, like I know you're talking about the hospitality world. Like, there's so much. It's exciting to try to see what the status quo is, and you can just say, yes, we could do that, but what is the opportunity that maybe 1% of hospitality the industry is doing? And so let's push up against that, and let's actually like evoke an emotion. Let's tell a story. And there's so much more opportunity nowadays with the media, with Instagram, with Facebook, with YouTube. We can really connect with a really specific audience as well, as you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think pinging off of that too, like looking into like outdoor is what I'm very familiar with in food and beverage, but in outdoor specifically, there's always been this cookie cutter, like similar to hospitality, it's been this cookie cutter like guy on the top of the mountain with B-roll and voiceover over it. So like, how do you work to change the mold to make your company or brand stand out with these like focusing on one story versus like with, like I said, a lot of these outdoor things, it's like voiceover over like a bunch of different activities that are happening. Like how do you break that mold as either a filmmaker or brand by doing those types of things? And the nice thing about social media is there is such a low dollar entry point to test that kind of theory. So if you wanted to test a smaller version of that storytelling before you invested in a bigger piece like this, it is available to you and you don't have to spend a ton of money doing so.
And any following remarks, questions?
Ian, you were raising your fingers.
Oh no, I was just saying rock on to what Brenna was saying. Too much rock for one hand.
Yeah, Ian knows that B-roll stuff is just like, it's tired. So
yeah,
but, you know, at the end of the day too, like I don't want to diss on all of it because sometimes it's a solution for something. Yeah, and sometimes, and also I think that we're talking about today too is that the kinds of films that at least that Brennan and I are doing and that I'm trying to focus on, it takes time and it takes money to actually accomplish. So in order to actually tell an emotional story, it's not something that you can just call up one day and then have done the next. It's something that actually takes thought, time, and emotion. And so a lot of the times you're not really just paying for the shoot. You're not just paying for somebody's labor to just show up. It's all the pre-production and thought that goes into actually what we're shooting at the end.
The only thing I would request is, as a final, it's been great tonight, thank you. But if Brenna, if you could package kind of an example of an arc of 5, 10, 15, 30, 60, an example of one of your clients that you've done work for, that would help Edna and I understand, you know, how you tell that story in just 5 seconds or 15 or whatever. I mean, that's because obviously the arc is kind of got to be able to stretch that long, but what elements get added in as you get longer?
Totally. Yeah. It's a challenge.
Yeah, right. I mean,
and so
back to your point, Chris, about just getting one point across, which we're bombarded all day. So one is good.
Right.
Right. But how do you, if you 5 seconds to 30 seconds, you can add in, or do you just elongate it?
It's definitely a challenge. And a lot of the times what I'll do, how I work at least is like, I'll work on that kind of that brand film, that 60 to 90 second piece. And then I'll help the agency or the client get to that cut. And then they work to cut down their little social media cuts. So sometimes I kind of get removed from that process as the artist and kind of a director. And then I let like the brand people and agencies kind of iron out all the details. So I'm not as like in the details of those 5 to 20s all the time.
Yeah.
15, so does that make sense?
Very great guys. Really super.
Cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, guys. We'll be in touch.
Fantastic. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a